Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Tone Talk with Mark Uzansky and Dave Friedman. We've got an awesome guest tonight. It's episode 87, by the way. Tosin Abasi. How are you, Tosin?
I'm good.
Welcome
How
to
you
the
guys
show.
doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
My pleasure.
Finally.
Dave, what's going on with you?
Same as last week, or the week before, or the last week. Oh, I don't
know. I know.
Nothing really exciting to report.
Yeah, same here. I actually went to a football game yesterday outside. What? My son's football game. But it was very socially distant and, but I was outside. So I did do a little of that, but outside of that, I haven't done anything. How's the year treating you, Tosin? Has it been as crazy for you as it is for everybody else?
Yeah. I think as a touring musician, this is I never processed a scenario that would shut down all the venues and all the live performances and even make it hard to even get in a recording studio. I just never conceived of something like that happening globally. So it was like the biggest curveball ever,
Yeah. And still, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been
not getting better?
Apparently it's worse than it's ever been, and we got a whole battle in front of us. Crazy thing is, I remember when this was just like news blurbs about China, and we had a whole US tour. We were doing direct support to Dance Gavin Dance, and this was going to be the largest rooms we've played on tour in the US. And at a point, it started to look kind of scary. I remember like Washington State shut down or something like that. And I was just like, I texted management, I'm like, guys, like, is the tour going to be affected? And they were like, no, it'll be fine. This, that, and the other. And then literally the day we were meant to leave for tour, so the tour bus is here, the trailer's here, production's rented, crews flown in, merch was ordered, all that stuff. The day we were supposed to play our first show, they closed like Major League Baseball and the NBA and everything shut down, and we were just like literally like loading our tour bus. So yeah, it's been a weird one.
So have you been recording in that spare time, or?
Actually, yeah, we ended up just pivoting to doing an album, and that's essentially what the band's been up to. There was a while where we were afraid to even get in the same room with each other, just because you know how when this thing started, no one was really that sure about airborne this, or like there was just like a lot of different information about how high risk certain activities were, and we were just like erring on the side of caution. So we waited a few months, and then we were just like, look, the music is worth dying for, I guess. So
you're probably like, okay, look, everyone go get a test, and then
yeah, I don't know if you guys have tried this, where you choose a few of your buddies or something, and you're like, all right, you guys, if we all agree to the same type of rules, we can hang out. And you kind of have like your own little pod of people. And we kind of tried that, where we're just like, it isn't a free for all. You can't like go everywhere and do everything, but like, select few of us, mainly the band, we just decided to kind of like be more conscious, and that way we could see each other, with some level of safety,
Right. Yeah, I actually haven't done that, but it makes total sense, especially from a band perspective, if you're going to do that.
Yeah, but but you still have those. The problem, if everyone agrees, it's then what are their kids or girlfriends or what, whoever else is also involved in their life, have they agreed?
Yep.
And are they following the same rules?
Totally.
Because it seems to be how it happens. Someone
it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone has it.
Well, we were working with Misha Mansour Periphery, and he was doing some production, but his roommate is an ICU nurse, or she's like a pediatric nurse. So it was kind of like, bro, like, I mean, you're kind of living with someone who works in hospitals. This is kind of
Right.
you know, but it's been fine, strangely enough. So
Good. Well, knock on wood.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So what about what kind of recordings have you been doing, and what's is it ready to come out anytime soon, or just curious?
so it's For Animals as Leaders. It's our next full length album, and we're gonna be dropping it. I think we're gonna take a different approach slightly to where we'll roll the stuff out in singles. Just because with COVID, you can't do a headlining tour. You can't do the same sort of album rollout because a lot of the stuff you would package with the release is just off the table. So we're gonna try to, also with the way that music is consumed now, like everyone's either on Spotify or Apple Music, and they're kind of like, these algorithms really favor like frequent engagement as opposed to just like this one moment in time you put out a bunch of songs and then you hope that it keeps getting recommended to people and stuff. It's actually better to continuously engage, and I think more people will hear it that way. So we're going to try to modify the release strategy to kind of update it for how people are listening to stuff now.
Release a bunch of singles and then eventually package it as an album.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It makes sense, at least personally from my perspective. I mean, releasing a whole album these days almost seems like so old school.
Yeah, but let me ask you, I mean, like, we're all old enough to remember an album coming out, and you look at it as like a body of work. You know, you're like,
right.
And have your listening habits changed? Like, if not for albums you already know and love, but if someone puts out a new album, like, you're probably going to get the whole thing and listen to it, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, I just like, I'm in that weird, I feel like that's my behavior with music, but I feel like very close to me are people young enough to like never have owned physical music collections, and they're just kind of like, you know, we even experienced this on tour. We put out an album in the end of 2016, basically 2017, and I realized that like we could be playing deep cuts from the album, but like people who had actually bought it maybe online or whatever hadn't necessarily heard track 9 because like maybe it's on a Spotify playlist and there's only like 2 tracks from the album that are on that playlist, or they didn't really like dive deep into it as a full body of work. They're just kind of like skimming. And I just feel like that's how it is now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if an artist that I'm into releases a single, I'm still going to download that regardless whether it's just the single or it's the album. You know, I'll just listen to either one, you know, the whole thing or just that one single and be happy with what I get, I guess, you know. So it's weird. It's a weird time.
I feel like the single will get more attention. The
Yeah.
singles, you know. But yeah, I think there's a kind of I think because of COVID and because of the rise of like algorithm driven content, I think there's a lot of behind the scenes sort of like pivoting to figure out the best way to actually maximize that stuff. So I think we might start to see a lot of like different strategies to people releasing music, especially if you can't tour the album yet, and you can't, I mean, it's kind of weird, you know?
Yeah, that's the toughest part.
I'm one of these weird people that still like to buy the albums.
You like the physical product.
Well, I don't mind. Well, even if I actually purchase it online, I feel it's contributing for, you know, it's for the artist. You know what I mean? I don't feel really great about Spotify, you know, because that's not making the artist any money, you know?
Yeah.
Or not much.
I agree with you.
So I always try, if I like an artist, I always try to, if they have something out, I'll always try to purchase it. I know that's a rarity these days.
No, yeah. You know what's
Or if it's
funny?
vinyl, I'd buy vinyl for sure.
So vinyl thrives for some reason.
Yeah.
I think there's something about vinyl that enrolls people. But you know what I've noticed about kind of what you're talking about, Dave, is I feel like it's genre specific. I think they're like in metal and rock, I find that people feel connected to the bands they love and they want to directly like contribute to that band.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we're talking about EDM or some shit, like I feel like they're just like they just kind of assume that it's all fine and that they're like a drop in the bucket and like but I think like rock and metal fans feel like maybe we're part of a subculture and we're part of like it's not exactly mainstream and like we've got to like actually like we care about our bands existing in a way that's different, you know. So
maybe I just know too much about what's going on behind the scenes, you know.
Yeah.
and how the artist is getting fucked and all that. So you know, I don't know. Music is not free. I don't believe music is free. That's
No, neither do I.
I'm old though, so
you're old enough. The problem is it's like kind of free. It's not, and it kind of is for all intents and purposes the way people consume it. Like they can just go on YouTube or they can go on, you know, Spotify, and there's no real transaction. So I think psychologically, strangely enough, I remember Radiohead. This was a while ago, but they did a pay what you want thing. They put out an album and they were just like, and they had a lot of people volunteer to overpay, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting part of consumer behavior because it's like never in the history of selling things to someone be like, I don't know, you can have it for free, but if you want to give me money also, you can volunteer to pay me.
It does work that way because I remember a long time ago there was a concert we did at Tone Merchants in Orange County when it was in Orange County still. And it was instead of ticket prices, we just said, pay what you want for your ticket, you know, just make your donation, you know.
Right.
And so it's like people at first were like, well, what is everyone else paying? You know, and in the end, there were some guys that paid like, you know, $4, but there were a lot of guys that paid way more than what we would have charged anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, it really sort of balanced itself out.
Yeah.
Which was cool, which is totally cool. It's like, you know, we're asking for a donation. So, you know,
It reminds me of, I went to the museum in New York and it was the same kind of thing. They were like, well, you can get him, you know, you don't have to donate anything, but if you want to, it was
they make you feel bad.
Yeah, the Metropolitan Museum of no, it was natural history. So you know, of course, you're like, well, you know, I have to give some, you know, like I can't just go in for free. So of course, you know, you pay a little. But yeah, it's interesting. People overpay. That's an interesting way to do it. Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, have you guys heard the new Wolfgang stuff that he came out with?
I haven't heard it, but I just saw some stuff about it today. So
you didn't watch the video yet?
No, like a music video?
Yeah. That's a rough one to watch.
Is it a bunch of like photos of him and his dad?
It's a bunch of family photos from the time he was a little
video.
boy.
Actually, it's video
and everything growing up, you know.
Oh wow!
And it's just like, and you're listening to the lyrics, and then you just like, ah!
Yeah.
Holy crap! It hits you pretty hard. All of a sudden, it hits you pretty hard. You know? But number one on all of Apple.
Oh really?
Of all charts, number one.
All charts.
Pop song.
So beyond
right below it is Billie Eilish.
Well, congratulations to that, and I'm so happy that there's such a response.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And who better to do a tribute like that? You know, it's kind of
and there's just the single itself. You know, releasing a single, and it's interesting. He was kind of alluding to the fact about how he's going to do his album, and he might actually release kind of bits and pieces along the way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how he's going to do it, but But he has another.
Played every instrument.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
every instrument.
That's incredible. Yeah, it seems like they had such a loving relationship just from the outside looking in the bit I saw, and that's like, I'm really happy that that was the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because it's like family transcends everything, and to have a strong relationship with your father, it's like invaluable.
Well, now you got to watch the video and
Yeah, I'm gonna be all upset,
feel sad like the rest of us did.
Yeah, have some tissues ready. That's for sure. Yeah. But that song's a bit softer. But the other song, Dave, you heard the other song, right?
Yeah, the other song he released was a heavier song. The one, this first single was dedicated to his father, was kind of a pop song, so just pop rock kind of song, so to
softer kind of thing.
But the other song was heavier
and awesome, like really good. Yeah, like I was like, wow, very impressed. So cool stuff. Yeah. So how did you get into playing guitar, Tosin? Take us back.
Back to the beginning. All right, it's kind of uncool, but I was playing the clarinet in the school orchestra, like in the 3rd and 4th grade. So I learned how to read music, and like, I was understanding a bit of music theory, but the clarinet was not very cool. I wasn't hearing it on MTV, and you know what I mean? Like, but a friend of mine in the neighborhood was taking guitar lessons, and he had a guitar lying around, and it was just curious to me. So I asked him to show me something one day when I was in the living room, and he showed me a Metallica riff, like the beginning of one, and I was just like, guitar is really awkward at first, but for some reason I was like, it felt really gratifying to get like a really basic riff down, and I don't know why. I didn't give it much thought. I just was like, I want one of these, and I asked my dad to get me one, and he got me this like Strat knockoff thing. I mean, this thing was like, he didn't know anything about instruments, neither did I, but like, dude, the neck was bowed, and like, it was just unplayable. But I figured it out, and luckily for me, when I started playing, the most conspicuous guitar music was like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden. And if you could play a power chord and move it around, you could play most of your favorite songs. Yeah. So the learning curve, like I didn't have Google to see like some like 9-year-old, Chinese girl shredding, Racer X or whatever, like to discourage me, it's just like, I could just like learn the whole, Nirvana album. And it was like a low enough bar for me to like really feel like I was progressing pretty quick. And guitar is kind of addictive, or at least in my opinion. I love the small victories of like learning a song or a technique or whatever the case is, and like you couldn't do it a month before, and then now you can do it. So I really kind of just started to get more and more enrolled in that process. Then from there, I discovered like heavier bands, like, this is kind of transitioned into stuff like Deftones and Incubus, and like it was kind of the new metal wave, Slipknot. I remember Slipknot came out, I was like, this is the darkest, heaviest music I've ever heard. And then I discovered death metal, and then I discovered, progressive metal. I think it was primarily because I was like, basically my exposure to music was limited to whatever was on heavy rotation on the radio and whatever was on MTV. So I never really heard like, I didn't really hear Vai and Satriani until I started kind of digging into Guitar Player magazine and like buying records on my own. So a lot of my years were just spent playing whatever I was exposed to.
It was a cool time though. A lot of guitar stuff. I mean, maybe not the virtuoso kind of things, but great. I mean, Soundgarden and Nirvana and all the bands that came out through the 90s, and then even like later into the that heavier thing, Slipknot and everything else that came out around later in the 90s or early 2000s. It was an interesting time. It was a bunch of cool songs and a bunch of cool bands, and it was.
I agree.
It was cool.
It felt like metal was evolving in this way that like, because you had your Slayers and you had your Metallicas, and you know you had metal that like was like capital M metal, like it just was uncontroversial. But then you would get bands like System of a Down, or you know these other bands that were not your straight ahead metal. But I think it was a cool time because of the creativity. You know, it was kind of like heavy music was going in a lot of different directions. So that was cool. Sure. But I remember turning on classic rock stations and hearing stuff like Hendrix and like old Van Halen and stuff like that. And so there was this instructional videos, like 50 Van Halen licks. And like, I remember realizing it was like, from what I learned from those licks, it felt like if you took a blues player and like shot him into the future and like, you just added, you know, because it had some rock and pentatonic foundations, but like technique wise, it was beyond anything you'd ever really need to play the blues with. And it was cool. That's like my first taste of shred was like, you know, Van Halen. And then I started to like dig deeper for more players, and obviously the Yngwie Malmsteens and the Paul Gilberts and the Vine, John Petrucci. And I just get Hot Licks videos. All these guys had instructional videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I go to my music store and just get one video. And the hair, it's just
yeah.
Classic.
That's my education basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, yeah. So basically, you started off with this stuff that you were exposed to, but then started reaching back for the stuff that happened before your time, so to speak. And a lot of people do it that way.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you want to play guitar fast, you're probably going to end up playing metal, just because it's the only genre that allows for you to get away with sweep picking and sweep taps and all this stuff, and you're not upsetting the producer and the rest of the band members. So like, I feel like this advanced guitar technique just kind of like steered me in the direction of kind of like heavier music, because it's the only context that these dudes were popping up. I'm like, it was, you know, hair metal had it, but then it started to get even more so, you know, with progressive metal and stuff like that. So that's how I became the weird guitar player I am today.
Well, yeah. So how did that happen exactly? So, I mean, you developed a definitive style, which doesn't really happen all that much. You know, there were people over the years that have done it. I mean, obviously, you know, like you mentioned, Eddie Van Halen, he obviously came out of the 70s essentially and was like, what the heck is this? You know? But not many people have done real definitive signature sort of sounds. And I do believe you have now. And with what you do and the kind of guitars you play and the way you play it, it's really unlike anyone else.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you feel that, and I definitely want to be that type of player, because as we're talking about music, I think we're going to talk about dudes who defined a sound. You know what I mean? And it doesn't happen very often, and these players are usually so impactful that they create a whole bunch of copycats, not in a derogatory way, but like we get super inspired. I mean, dude, you want to sound like your favorite player, but it's not that often that like someone comes along and really contributes something new to the instrument. So I think it's twofold. I was always inspired by players who really created an original approach. So, you know, everyone from Van Halen to Alan Holdsworth. I feel like Steve Vai has an incredibly idiosyncratic and unique voice on the guitar. Yngwie Malmsteen blew my mind when I first heard the classical thing through a Marshall stack on a Stratocaster. I was just like, dude, what? You know what I mean? And so I think I obsessed over the guys who like were the guys. And then I think it's kind of funny as far as my style with like the extended range guitar. The new metal thing had a lot of down-tuned guitars and a lot of extended range guitar. And so innocently I wandered into that territory, but then I realized guys like John Petrucci and Vi were using 7 strings and doing a lot more than just playing in the lower register. But it really got interesting for me on the guitar when I started to look at dudes like Victor Wooten and stuff like that, who were not necessarily guitar players, but using a variety of techniques. I mean, Vic, I've seen him perform and he goes through a range of everything from tapping to that double thump thing that he's doing. And I remember thinking that, you know, it's not necessarily about the guitar or bass at this moment. It's just stringed instrument. Like if it's got strings on it, you can manipulate those strings to sound a range of ways. And so I became really technique focused, and I always wanted to put it all together. You know, guys like Stanley Jordan, who were playing primarily with tapping. You got Frank Mbali doing all the economy picking stuff. So my whole thing was like, I literally am no different than anyone else who's trying to be their hero. But like, I think because I have my own band, I get away with literally throwing everything that I like into the same musical context, and there's no one to piss off, you know? So,
Right.
yeah.
So
yeah, it does seem like, and all that you mentioned, it does seem like you just took all those influences and all that style and just threw it in a blender, and out popped what you're doing now. Probably not that simply, but
over time, yeah.
Because it's a whole different, even like the gear that's used, everything is very much works for your particular thing, you know. I find it's really cool because it's like there's a little bit of that Victor Wooten, and there's all this, you know, and there's a little bit of some other bass players mixed with, you know, all sorts of other, like this little bit of Stanley Jordan, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah.
No, it's cool. And you mentioned gear. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've noticed this over time, but metal guitar playing has like evolved to demand like pickups that are like extremely articulate, and like amplifiers that are really tight, like have really fast low end responses and are really gainy, you know what I mean? And like it's kind of like, I ended up kind of doing a niche thing with metal that combined all of my favorite players, but then also I needed to have guitars with more than 6 strings and pickups that sounded good in that low register, and an amp that sounded good with that low register, but also could do the lead stuff. And I don't know, it's just like, I didn't necessarily plot the course consciously, but you know, over time, it ended up being a pretty specific original thing, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of people are I don't know if we want to call them copiers, but I mean, you've influenced a lot of people to play that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a trip, but I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is a trip, right? I mean, do you like seeing it, or does it kind of weird you out?
I like seeing it. I try to give away any of the techniques I use or any of the harmonic concepts. I've done a lot of clinics, and so I don't know. There's legends of players like kind of hiding from the crowd when they pull out something original that they don't want other people to copy. But I know that I benefit by basically copying my favorite guitar players, and so I always felt like sharing the concepts behind what I'm doing. And dude, inspiration is like, come on, it's why there's all those guitars on your walls, why there's all these amps back there. It's like, inspiration is the thing that is beyond the mundane, normal day to day. It's something that's like kind of strikes you deep and like makes you want to like reach for more, or gives you a type of energy. And so I just remember being inspired by so many guitar players. So if I can inspire other people, I feel like I'm giving them something that's like really valuable, you know?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So how did you then migrate to your own brand?
Man. Okay, so I was because I play 7 and 8 string guitars, it already limited, like I couldn't just go to like Guitar Center or Sam Ash and like grab a Gibson, you know, because it just didn't have.
Right.
So I ended up seeking out kind of luthiers who could make extended range instruments. And I commissioned a few custom guitars, and I ended up having some unique ones like Stramberg and Rick Toon. And these guys started employing like multi-scale and kind of ergonomic shapes, headless guitars. And this is at a point where no major manufacturers were doing it. You literally kind of had to like commission a custom guitar and wait a quarter of a year for it, or whatever the case was. But it kind of like created an appetite for these guitars that I wasn't seeing readily available. So I was an Ibanez guy, and I was basically playing like an RG with extra strings on it. And I was just kind of like, this is cool, but I had these kind of cool custom guitars at home that were almost like more purpose-built for extended range. So I eventually realized I wanted to approach making kind of an 8-string guitar from the ground up, as opposed to taking an existing model and just throwing more strings on it. And Ibanez was cool with that. And so I drew something up, and we kind of, you know, we were prototyping stuff, and it was going great, but they're such a large company that even very small changes require a lot of time. There's a lot of moving parts, especially on the factory level. Like that scale just requires a lot of time. And so I remember at one point just feeling like, damn, it'd be a shame if this guitar only came in one finish, only came in 8-string, and if a guy wanted a 7-string version in a quilted maple top, they probably weren't going to do it. It just didn't fit, you know, it didn't fit with the business model. And living in Southern California, there are people who make guitars here, and there are people who make amps here. So it was just kind of like, and I had designed it. So I was like, well, I own this design, and my aspirations for this go beyond like a single SKU for like a year. I would love to have a custom shop, because I came from making, you know, I came from ordering custom guitars too. So long story short is like, I branched out on my own with a local luthier, and we attempted a custom shop model, but that proved to be a lot more complicated than I realized. For various reasons. So part of the reason I started the guitar company, I think, is because I had no idea what I was getting myself into, if I'm going to be honest.
That's funny.
You know, that standard line that I use on a bunch of generally amp designers when we have them on the show is, so when did you realize you made that mistake with your career? or your, you know.
Yeah.
Choice.
Yes. Yeah. It's a funny way to put it, but it's like, yeah, like,
yeah.
I will say that fortunately I was naive enough and inspired enough to just like really want to do it, you know, because I think otherwise I would have talked myself out of it, you know, especially leaving a company like Ibanez. They're a fantastic company, super, you know, their roster's incredible. They were great, but luckily I was ambitious and naive enough to try it. And I think there's this thing in me that wants to be original. And I think playing a guitar that I designed and like I'm at the center of production with, like, it just felt like, it felt worth it, you know? So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, man.
So there it is.
Cool. Yeah. So that's it's one of our Legion series. So we started to evolve our business model. We moved away from the custom thing. Like if you click on masters, yeah, you can see various iterations. We moved away from the custom thing just because it was becoming kind of a logistical nightmare, and we we spec the guitars based off of what we think really creates a well-playing, good sounding, great looking instrument. And then once the guitar is complete, we offer them for sale. So no one's having to wait while their guitar is being built, and then they're getting a call because, some OEM manufacturer in Korea is shut down because of Corona, and you can't get individual bridge saddles for another few. There's all these whatever. So we sell what we have, and we spec them the way we think works. And it has been really cool to get these things out into the world. It's like kind of a trip to see other people making music on something you produce. I don't know, Dave, do you have this experience? Like, you hear someone like on a record with your amp, or you're it's going out into the world, and these people are like using something you designed, and it's kind of like this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I like that blue one.
That's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice to hear that, especially if they did a good job. I find it so funny with amps. It's amazing to me, like how many people can make them. Even in videos and things, maybe not make them sound as good as they really do. And just maybe they don't have an ear for it or something. But then other people, are amazing. But then again, people's hands all sound different too. So it's hard to.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something to me that I thought was like really, really smart. But it was like we were talking about amps and EQ, and it's like making an amp that's hard to make sound bad, like not giving the player the option to get a bad sound. It's kind of like tuning the amp to be in that sweet spot to where it essentially sounds away, but it was designed to sound a certain way, and you don't have carte blanche with how far you can, whether it's scooping the mids or adding bass. You kind of parameterize what the voice of that amp's supposed to be, and the end result is kind of like you get something that sounds great most of the time.
Yeah, it's always if you give them too much, there's a good chance that they could make it sound bad, maybe. So, yeah, I always kind of felt that way with graphic EQs. Although a lot of those boogie amps needed that graphic EQ, but you potentially could definitely set it to sound just god awful. Those were never easy amps to dial in. There was always something you had to know about how to set the EQ just right,
Yeah, I've had some, especially if you're an amp tweaker and you're sitting there and you've got like myriad options, it's not always the best thing in the world.
Right.
It's kind of like, and we also make a telly thing. I don't know if you click on the top bar there, just in case anyone is watching who's not an extended range dude.
Is it bass T?
Yeah, it's bass T.
Yeah, there you go. Just a basic.
Mm-hmm.
Those are nice.
Ergonomically shaped telly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So it's kind of funny because as a musician,
wow, there's an aged one. That's really interesting.
Yeah. You're down with the relics.
No, I'm down with the relics. But what I find extremely interesting is the mix of formats on this. So you have this extremely modern, futuristic body shape mixed with the vintage telly aesthetic, and then toss in the relic on top of it.
Right.
That's cool. Why not?
It's been sent from the future into the past, into the present.
So can you tell us about some of the different, like go through the different series? What's the difference between the different series?
Okay, so the Legion series is our most recent edition, and it's guitars made in Korea, world music. And it was so we could kind of get people's stuff at a lower price point, because manufacturing in the US is just, it's expensive. And we have a lot of a lot of players who would like a guitar but didn't necessarily have the money for the US shop stuff. So we were able to get something going with World Music to have a large inventory of more affordable guitars. And spec-wise, it's sick. They're essentially, it's a Wenge neck. It has the individual bridge saddles. It has the Fishman pickups. So it's not like we cut corners. It's just we were allowed to produce them in a different, in a different place that allows us to kind of offer them at a lower price point. And we were able to make a lot of them. That's the other thing. I mean, we're constantly out of guitars because, the scale at which we're making them here in the US, we're not doing, huge numbers. We're specifically because of, I actually like hitting this sort of sweet spot where there's not a million of them, and we can put a lot of attention on each guitar that comes out. We can choose the specs of each guitar that comes out. But the Legion was an attempt to kind of add a larger volume, lower price point guitar.
Gotcha.
I like that light blue there in the picture. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that color too.
I think it's really cool. The brown.
A limited number of those sold out.
Yeah.
That's cool. Then we've got the Master Series.
So Masters is made in the U.S. By Grover Jackson, and we just kind of wanted to pay homage to his legacy as like a guitar builder, and so that's what those are.
I had no idea that Grover was making these.
Yeah. We were just like, and it's actually really cool. I think Grover has a knack for neck profiles in particular, which is, a guitar is an interesting thing because, mojo is it's a hard thing to identify why a guitar speaks to you. And particularly neck profiles, they really are like the primary point of contact with how you're playing. And I think there's a bit of magic to how Grover is doing his neck profiles. Personally, I find that they feel good. Even on an 8-string, it's kind of funny. He had never done it before, but I think he was able to translate, his know-how into it, and came out great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I really dig it. Yeah, I had no idea that Grover was making these types of instruments. It's great.
Yeah, so the Spartan series is these are kind of like they're all the same neck and body material. It's like this open pore swamp ash thing. Mm-hmm. So we called it Spartan just because it's kind of like a no frills, like straight ahead thing, and we can kind of price them a little bit more friendly because we're not doing a bunch of clear coats and various stuff like that. But those are made in the US as well. And yeah, they're cool. Goto 510 bridge, Fishman Fluence pickups,
so that was more of a normal style guitar.
Yeah, it's not multi-scale. It's 6 strings,
with your take on the body and everything, and
mm-hmm.
It's cool.
Then the J series are made at Dynagaki in Japan. So these are as an Ibanez guy, I realized that the Japanese really do excel at attention to detail and precision, and we were fortunate enough to get a relationship with Dyna, and so we get a small batch of these, and we do 7 and 8 strings with them, and they're cool. These stand out because the neck profile is actually asymmetrical. It's a teardrop shape.
Oh,
yeah, because one thing I was realizing with a lot of necks on a 6-string, you can have a fat neck. Say you have like a vintage Telly or something on a 6-string. It's a pretty fat neck, but it feels good. But if you were to make that an 8-string neck, you'd be like, dude, like.
It's like a 2x4.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I had this idea of basically combining a slightly larger, rounder neck profile that you'd find on like a more traditional 6-string, and over the profile of the neck, having it transition to a thinner, more flat profile as you approach the bass strings. So you kind of end up with a teardrop shape. So when you go to place your thumb for like widespread legato, you kind of have a bit more neck to work with. And then as your thumb creeps up the neck for like chords on an extended range, you have less neck material there. It's thinner. And it was an experiment, but it's cool. People who have these J Laratas really like the asymmetrical neck profile. So that's exclusive to this Japanese line that we have.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. And then we talked about the T series.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So then, sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I said that. Yeah. So that's basically it.
Is anything in stock?
We are currently sold out of everything.
That's good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we have some guitars just got completed in QC today, so we're going to be going live soon.
Cool. And then I know that we talked about the pickups as well, right? So,
yeah,
so these are your special pickups.
Yeah, so Fishman entered the sort of the pickup game. I mean, Fishman's been known for acoustic pickups, piezo stuff, acoustic amplifiers, but they came to market with these Fluence pickups, which are really cool. They're powered, so they're kind of like an active thing, but they don't sound like EMGs. So I feel like when you say active, people instantly think of like the EMG sound. These can sound like a PAF or like lipstick pickups or whatever the case is. But basically it's a 48 layer printed coil as opposed to a mechanically wound coil around a magnet. They actually like have a uniform amount of layers. And so it's a 48 layer precision coil. It still works with magnets like ceramic or Alnica or wherever the case is. But the end result is like kind of like an HD pickup in a way. Like it's almost like you could take your favorite passive pickup and add a bit of compression, but not the type of compression that squashes the note, but the stuff that lifts detail. Mm-hmm. And you can have a noiseless pickup, and then they're able to do two voices each, and which is really interesting. It's not like you're doing like a dB change or something like that. It's like it sounds like two different distinct pickups. And so I remember just playing these against something I was working on already in passive set and just feeling like, I mean, the clarity is uncanny, and the flexibility is just phenomenal. Like the set we put in our Telecasters or Greg Koch's set. I don't know if you've heard of Greg Koch, but
yeah, he's been on the show actually. Yeah,
Greg, dude. Yeah, Greg is an outlandish guitar player.
Yeah.
And he's also a guy who's got a ton of great old Fender guitars. And so, when I noticed that he was playing these, I was like, all right, this is a dude who definitely knows foundational tone, and he's a fan of that stuff. And he's got a signature set of these things. And hearing him demo them, I was just blown away. It sounds like everything you'd want a Telecaster to do without the noise, and then even more clarity, And what's cool is that they don't sound like un-guitar-like. The guitar is a particular instrument. And Dave, I think you could, kind of speak to this when it comes to like, you took a vintage 30 speaker compared to like a PA speaker or a studio monitor. The vintage 30 speakers, technically it's colored and limited in its range, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. So I feel like a guitar pickup is similar, where it's like you're not actually looking for like a 100% translation. You're looking for character. It's kind of supposed to, you know what I mean? And Fluence was able to sound like a normal pickup, but just like kind of clean up some of the things like noise, and it has an added degree of clarity. And for me, it's like that middle line between, some of the benefits of an active pickup, but without the sacrifices, and then some of the benefits of a passive pickup without some of the shortcomings. And I think they're great.
Yeah, I think the Fluence stuff sounds really good. I mean, I am a non-active pickup guy too. So, but the Fluence do sound good. They do sound really good. It's not like an EMG, like you said, not at all. Just pick your flavor of what you want, depending on what your style is,
Yeah, they're definitely worth plugging in, especially into like a tube amp, like even something like a Fender with a lot of range or something like that, or whatever you got, just because it's a you can talk about tone a lot, but there's also the feel of the pickup and just like the response. So whoever is listening or watching, if you get a chance, I know some manufacturers are kind of putting the Fluence in their guitars like from factory. So you can go and try them out, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah, they're cool.
Mm-hmm.
I own one guitar with a set of them in it, so it's cool.
Which set do you have? Do you know? Classic.
It's the one. It's the slightly hotter one, so it's the one that's a little more like a JB kind of set. It does two different sounds, and
Mm-hmm.
at least that one. But then I've heard Steve Stevens had a set that was more of the vintage PAF-y one that he
Mm-hmm.
liked. He liked that a
Right.
lot too. So,
Can I ask you, Dave, when
uh
you're voicing an amp,
huh.
do you have like how do you have a go-to guitar, or do you say like, okay, it doesn't really matter the guitar, but I need a Duncan 59 style humbucker is going to give me a uniform, and do you use that as like a control, or is that not even how it works?
I have various guitars. Generally, though, generally what I tend to like is a pickup that is kind of a slight. I don't like really hot pickups. I tend to like more PAF like, but ones that are a little more rock version of PAF type. If you kind of understand what I mean, ones that have a little more cut and a little more thing, not quite as vintage. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the vintage one sounding ones are cool, but that's a whole different thing. So, my favorite pickup, probably of all time, was the Motor City pickups with a guy that winds pickups out of Detroit. Second degree black belt. It's very open PAF-y kind of thing, but real percussive and rock like, really cool.
Nice.
So that's kind of my favorite pickup of all time. And then, of course, later I got into making pickups. We didn't copy it in any way, but I came up with something also that I really like. That is in what I basically said, in that vein of. But I have guitars. I have guitars over here to the right of me that you can't see that vary in heat. So like I have different. I have ones that are a little more vintage. So I have a vintage Telly. Okay, I can listen to amps with that. I have a 3 single coil vintage style Strat. I can listen to things like that. I can, super Strat humbucker guitars that do that, Van Halen-esque sort of thing, so to speak. Then I have a Les Paul that'll do that kind of thing. And then I have an EVH guitar that Eddie gave me that is kind of hot, hot on the pickup side. So I can listen to the amp with that pickup.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have some other stuff with some Duncan stuff in it too. So I find it generally, if I voice it just with my one guitar that I really like the pickup in, it kind of translates to all the pickups.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the different guitars will give you the different flavors you want.
Right. So
that's how I always look at it. It's like, when you plug the vintage Telly in, it's going to sound like a Telly, but maybe through this blazing distortion, which is super cool sounding, snarly and attacky. Same thing with the Strat, So if the amp sounds good with all the pickups, you're golden.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got all the flavors kind of on deck, so you can basically sample.
The funny thing is, like in traditional guitars, at least, there's not that many flavors, so to speak. I mean, there are a lot of pickups out there and this and that, but tried and true basics, you have your PAF style humbucker or your slightly more rock version of the PAF style humbucker. You have your JB-esque humbucker, so to speak, the slightly hotter thing. You have your vintage single coils for Strats and vintage Telly pickups and things like that. you know, in the normal guitar genre, that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really. I mean, there's slight variations and some pickups. You know, the thing is with every guitar, you have to find sort of the pickup that works really well with that particular guitar, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're really, you know, some guitars, it's like, well, I don't like it with this pickup, but it sounds really cool with this one.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Like, I think a lot of people, when they're buying guitar, they try to find the guitar that speaks to them, and whatever's in it apparently is working for that guitar in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, maybe sometimes over time you want to swap stuff out, and you know,
Sure. Yeah. I've done that over the years, and you know, I've kind of you what I find is generally you come full circle, you know. So you start with something, you really like it, and then you go, you know, I don't know if I like it, and then I want to try something else, and you try something else, and you try something else, and you try something else, and then in the end, you come back to that original pickup, and you're like, why the hell did I ever even try these other ones?
Yeah, I've been guilty of that. Actually.
You know, that happens. That happens so many times over the years, and after a while, if you've done it long enough, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't need to even bother.
I didn't go there.
I've been
I don't need to go there.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I'm kind of also like, you know, I'll go on record sort of saying like, you know, pretty much anything like Seymour Duncan makes sounds pretty good. You know what I mean? There are different variations, but I can pretty much say that all their pickups sound good.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be for you, but they all sound good. You can't always say that with every pickup manufacturer. You know, so
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that.
So what amps do you play, Tosin?
So I was for a lot of the touring that we have done, I was using a Fractal. And funnily enough, we just run the Friedman Harry Brown Eye like patch in the Fractal.
All right, goes over.
I get no money from that.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's exposed people to how sick those amps sound and the brand in general. But like, we would do that, and then it's kind of like what Dave was saying a minute ago with pickups. It's like you start with something that seems you have a starting point, and then you go on a search for alternatives and maybe unconventional things. So at a point I was running a Fractal with powered full range flat response speakers. So instead of tubes and like guitar cabs, I was running essentially powered monitors. Then I'd go direct into the front of house. And I mean, eventually I just came back around to pedals and a tube head and cabs. So the last touring rig I had was a Morgan SW50R, which I use as a pedal platform. And I would run the Friedman BE, the OD100 pedal as like a rhythm and slap tone. It allowed me to almost have like a 5-channel amp. I mean, it's as many drive pedals as you basically have, you know, but the amp gave me all the tube response, and that's my last touring rig. So basically a pedal platform, getting all my flavors of drives from pedals into a single channel head.
Yep.
Yeah, and I dug the Morgan because it's got a lot of headroom to it, because it's like a lot of country guys are using this head. It's got a fast transient attack, and it's very percussive, but it doesn't have much breakup at all. So when you put a good pedal in front of it, you have this sort of hybridized sound. It's almost like if you could take a high gain head but open it up a bit, and it seems to just breathe a bit more. And in a way, you're deriving your distortion from, you know, the preamp and the pedal, and so it's a bit more controlled. Like a lot of the modern metal is like, we're asking of our distortion, like we're asking of a high level of precision as far as when the note starts and when it stops, and how much sag there is, and how much. It's almost like you don't want any of that stuff. You want this like razor precision type of distortion. And so I found that with the Friedman pedal, I got that awesome flavor of the Friedman sound. I just didn't have a Friedman amp at the time, and so I was plugging into the Morgan, and it's kind of like a hybrid version. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I want to throw another pedal in there, I'm not limited to the specific amp. I can get a
right. You can get some different flavors that you can tap into.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. What's that amp behind you right there?
Misha let me borrow his Matchless. This is a Clubman 35.
Oh, nice.
This thing is cool. It is it has a lot of personality.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Dave. So I use compression on the front end, but I notice amps have a type of compression. It seems to come from the power amp section of the amp. It's almost like
there's some, especially something like that Matchless or something. There's a certain it's really sort of a sag to the whole thing that kind of gives you that feel of compression. You know, the amp is actually sagging. It's not really compressing per se. Especially if it's cleaner, it's not really compressing. It's just sagging, because when you're smacking it hard, it's kind of giving like a compressor gives.
Right.
So, might not work in every application, you know. At least with when we had gotten together, you know, with the pedals and your Bogner pedal and your different things, you have kind of control over what you were doing into the pedal platform, so you could kind of go from one thing to another.
With the amp, it's kind of relatively fixed.
I mean, like people, like anyone who's listening, I mean, it's like, for what normal amps do not necessarily apply for what Tosin wants to do. It's very style specific and very guitar specific to the kind of thing you're trying to create. It's a very specific recipe, so to speak. You know, and you have to kind of throw your normal train of thinking out the window. Well, just like looking at the guitars, it's the same concept. You know, it's like, throw what you know about the guitar out the window and look at this from a fresh viewpoint, you know?
Yeah. I think it's kind of cool to maybe have a sound in mind and then start with a blank slate of how you want to get there versus, you know, because, I definitely, for me, it's almost like a traditional. It's like what I want out of distortion is very close to what amps that do exist, but there's just like some details that I don't always find in the specific amp. But if I can break it out into pedals and like compartmentalize it, I'm able to control every stage of it and kind of get that end result.
Yeah,
cool. That's cool. Hey, we've got a few questions, or got a lot of questions for you. One question from one of our regular viewers, Unfucking Believable. What's up? How are you?
I think you still have the best name of anyone.
And he was able to do it in limited number of letters too, so he got it all in there. Tosin's home setup versus touring versus recording, and plugins for recording.
That was a very good question. All right, home setup is a playground. So I've got Synergy stuff here. I've got Fractal stuff. I've got, this Matchless. I've got a Friedman Runt. I've got multiple pedal boards, and I've got all my guitars. So this is like where it doesn't matter. You're not having to play a set that has certain songs from certain. You can play with all the stuff you have. Then for tour, there are certain considerations, especially if you're touring internationally. I think this is why modelers get a lot of use, because there are a lot of bands who don't have budgets. I would love to have an A rig, a B rig, and a C rig, and there's one in Europe and there's one in the States. And
sure,
but We don't have that kind of. So for touring, I would usually run a fractal. But then I started touring with my pedal board. I never did any international touring with flying ahead. I would just source something over there, usually like a Mesa or something with an effects loop. But I think future touring rig will be tube amp and pedal board, and I'll find some cabs when I get over there.
Yeah.
And then recording is literally whatever works. I think with recording, you should be objective. For instance, for the recording we're doing, I'm using a plugin for virtually all the tones. It's the Neural DSP archetype Abasi plugin. And we swapped out some IRs, but objectively, it seemed to get the job done. But this is a plugin I designed specifically for my sound.
Yeah.
So that's the caveat. It's like I made it sound like I wanted it to sound. So that's what we're using for recording. But I'm really loving a tube head into a reactive load lately, as far as even for recording it. I think it beats out a fractal, it beats out a Kemper. Maybe it's in my head, but I feel like having a good reactive load and a good cabinet, a good speaker IR with a real head is kind of like the perfect way to get a tube tone into the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I agree. We have a super chat from Harmonicaster Dave for you. He says, Dave, I picked up a BEOD to try with my electric harmonica with the internal gain pot at 9. It sounds nice and creamy. When will we see a double BE Dirty Shirley pedal?
First of all, I love the fact that you're putting a harmonica through the BEOD. That is awesome. And as far as the BEDS pedal, well, no time really in the future that I know of. But hey, maybe you could try it with the new small box pedal that just came out today. Today is the release. Today is the release of the small box pedal.
Oh
yes.
So it's in all the stores?
Yeah, it is in the stores now. It's up in Sweetwater. So if you guys click our link and you want to buy it, it's on sale right now too. So it's on sale right now for 15% off. So it's $169.99, I think.
Make sure with the small box. How's that voiced? Or like, what's the flavor?
Well, okay. Well, it's less gain than the BEOD, obviously. Sounds good though. Like it'll do anything from light crunch to like heavier kind of stuff. You might really like it, actually. I should get you one to try.
I'm down.
See what you think. Yeah, I think you'd like it. It'd be a different flavor. It's a little different. I mean, it has that. It's still in the vein of my amps, It's still that. It does not have the tight knob, so to speak. It's kind of preset. Okay. But I'd like to actually hear what you think of it. It'd be interesting to hear it with your kind of scene.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So it's on sale now for $169.99. After December 7th, it should go back up for most of the retailers to $199, like the same as the other pedals we have.
Cool.
So if you haven't checked it out, check out Michael Nielsen's video of it. There's another guy, Alberto. A new video guy that we had from Spain, Alberto something, and it's on my personal Facebook. I posted it right now, so you can check him out too. He's doing a different stylistically, different kind of video. Yep,
that's great. I thought this was a good question. Also, Alex Lifeson, an influence for you?
Yeah, but not as directly as I think he is for a lot of other players. Like, but Rush, obviously impactful. Yeah. I don't think I ever like transcribed any of his like lead work or anything like that. But like I'm obviously, you know.
This is an interesting thought. What about Tony Levin?
Yeah, so I primarily know Tony Levin from like the Liquid Tension experiment and some, I guess, some King Crimson stuff, but if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I do dig the thing. You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
hear a little. I see a little of that in there.
Yeah,
whether you know it or not.
that's the funny thing. It's the whether you know it or not part. I remember I
Yeah.
heard some early King Crimson, and I was like, holy shit! It sounds like I've been stealing from these guys, but I have yet. This is my first time hearing it. It happened with Zappa.
Yeah.
It happened with some Pat Metheny stuff too, and I'm like, it's almost like there's like this collective consciousness, and you're just like tapping into it. You know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. You got there on your own, tapping into it. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How is it playing with? You went on tour with Nuno and Steve Vai and Zach Wild. I forget what was that. What was that tour?
Generation Axe is what it was.
Generation X, right? And you guys did Bohemian Rhapsody together, and that was like a big thing that like broke the internet for a while.
It must have been a trip, considering, like you were just saying, your influences of Yngwie and Vai and all this stuff, and you're being the new guy on the block, so to speak, in that camp. And what a bunch of interesting personalities to have on the bus,
dude. Dude, look.
Wait a minute, I gotta ask this: how many times did Zach talk you under the table? He never shuts up,
dude. Zach,
I love Zach, but
Zach has like pro wrestler energy. Like,
yes, I know. I know.
Dude, I love those guys. They're like just larger than life personalities. Iconic. I mean, look, for me, my primary exposure to Vai and Yngwie and Zach and Nuno was on the cover of Guitar World magazine and like MTV and stuff. So I remember walking into the first rehearsals and just being like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, these are some of my biggest influences.
I mean, but, you know, I see like you and Vai and Nuno. Okay, I see. I everyone getting along nice, but there's some big personalities with the other two. Dude. That must have been some interesting times.
All right. Yeah, Dave wants the
well, no, I mean, I'm not looking. No, I actually don't know. I've never met Yngwie myself. I love Zach. Zach's a friend of mine. But I mean, they're bigger than life personalities, both of them.
Well, yo, here's the thing.
It should have been interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, Generation X attempted to take dudes who normally headline and their own shit and put it all into kind of like a collaborative thing. And so, you know, sometimes there's some friction with like, you've been headlining your own shows for the past however long, and now you're like, there's a single tour manager and you've got to kind of compromise in certain ways because, you know, you're doing this thing with a whole bunch of other headliners. So Vai was basically like the peacemaker. He was like very much like, he kind of floated above it all. He could absorb all of the personalities and just
calm and zen.
Yeah, he's super zen, and his whole thing was just to like make everyone seem heard and valid, and make sure that the show didn't get fucked because of anyone being pissed or not having what they want or whatever the case is. I mean, surprisingly, it went. There was no real drama, but I will say the collective stories that those dudes have between with David Lee Roth and Ozzy Osbourne and Nuno's whole thing, like with, you know, #1 single, like international, like during the help, like those dudes. And I wish we could have filmed or done some sort of reality TV thing like off stage, because every night they were just telling me the most outrageous stories I've ever heard. And I'm like, dude, you couldn't even really say this stuff. Just the climate we have socially, this just shit you can't really get away with.
I've heard some things. Yes.
Yeah, so you have an idea, but I never stopped being. I never stopped being I don't want to say little kid, but it never stopped being novelty to me that I'm like sitting at a dinner table with Vi and Ingve and Zach and Nuno, and I'm on the bill with them, but I just like secretly in my brain was always just referential and just totally like, dude, I can't believe this. This is crazy.
Right.
Yeah. Each one of those dudes, the moment they play something, you know exactly who it is. It's like each one of them. It's kind of like, and yeah, it was really cool. Yeah. It's like bucket list shit,
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you played
lots of Marshall cabs up there.
Well, yeah, you've seen Ingve set up. It's funny. Yeah. No, it's funny because those guys I feel like they found a formula that works for them and they just like hit park. They're like, cool, that's it.
Yeah.
Boss.
Does Ingve ever not wear leather pants?
He wears jeans sometimes. All right, but I will tell you something funny, and I hope that this doesn't piss off Ingve, but like, we were on a tour bus together, right? Like, Ingve doesn't have pajamas. Like, you're never gonna catch Ingve like in his like, sweatpants. Like, I never saw it. Like, he just always looked like ready, like he's just Ingve mode, and like it was just kind of curious to me. There was never the like sweatpants and hoodie moment. It never happened.
Downtime, like not being Ingve.
Yeah, like that man is committed. He's always on. He's always cool. It's like it's a lot. Yeah,
that's funny. And then I don't think I got to see the video, but you play with Brian May.
Okay, well, Brian joined us for like a Zoom performance thing, so he filmed.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, and then we all put it in, but he did a real take, and the solos like slightly different. It's super super cool. And Steve Vai arranged Bohemian Rhapsody for 5 guitars, and on the first tour we actually didn't play it because it was just such a demanding thing to execute on top of all the other songs that we were doing together. But like halfway through, we started doing rehearsals at soundcheck, and Ingve almost didn't do it at first, and then we were able to enroll him. He literally was like, I don't trust myself to play the same thing twice. He's like, I can't do the orchestra thing. Like he's just got a go button, but it worked out. And that song arranged for 5 guitars, and then the actual guitarist playing it like in a room full of like guitar fans, it just kind of was like, it's almost like religious or something. It's almost like we're singing a hymn or something. Everyone knows it and everyone's feeling the same thing. And it was like so cool.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love watching it. It's great. I want to answer this question real quick because it stuck out to me in the music store. Hey, Mark, how are you and your family doing? Everybody's good. Thanks for asking. I appreciate it.
We're all healthy.
Yeah, all doing well, thankfully. They also said Tosin is such a well-spoken gentleman, so insightful I can listen to him all day long. That's nice.
Nice.
Your schooling paid off.
Yeah. High school dropout, but fair enough.
Well, then you were raised properly.
Yeah, read some books. Yeah.
Dave and Grover thinking in 7-string guitars. Cali 7.
Not at the moment. Maybe eventually. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. That'd be fun to do. I'd like to do it.
Yeah, I played is it the NoHo that's a double cut? It's almost kind of like a.
The NoHo is a short scale 24 fret guitar, so it's Gibson scale, but 24 fret.
But it's like a double cut, almost super strat style.
Yeah, yeah, with a maple cap on it. Yeah,
those are killer.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Buy it, actually.
Yeah, super cool.
If you did a 7 of that thing would be a shred machine.
Oh yeah,
that'd be interesting.
7 NoHo, yeah, that
aged.
We'll
do it like Sammy Bowler's guitar, aged.
Does he have a white one?
Yeah, have you seen that in videos or something?
Yeah,
yeah, he has a white one. It's funny. That's the first one we did like that, and it was like almost sacrilege because the maple top was really nice under it, painted right over that thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
But then wore away the paint, and then you saw the maple and the flame maple, and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And everyone, when we first did that, everyone's just like, oh my god, that's amazing looking.
yeah, I agree.
So you know, I don't know. There you go. Sammy and you should do a song. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Totally different approaches and styles, but interesting.
It could be cool. Yeah.
Would Tosin ever play a 6-string again? From Steve Wilhart.
Yeah, I play 6. I've been playing 6 more and more lately. So it's usually outside of the Animals as Leaders context. That's the only thing. But as a guitarist, yeah, like I think the 6-string guitar is kind of if I'm being honest, it's like it's a definite sweet spot, and it definitely ain't broke. Like there's just, especially we're talking about the scale length. When you get into extended range, you start to extend the scale length, and the neck gets bigger. I find that the 6-string guitar will just never be irrelevant. It is definitely a sweet spot for guitar. And some of the best ones are 6s. So yeah, I've got a few in my arsenal, and I definitely play them.
That's cool.
Excellent.
From
Purposeful Porpoise, Tosin, are you going to design an amp?
I don't know. That could be cool.
Could be.
Yeah, I love amps. I think, especially now that we have so many usable digital versions, it is almost create a full circle appreciation for like being in a room with an amp and plugging into it and just being like, there is no replacement for this. There just isn't.
So true.
Yeah.
How do you like the Synergy stuff? I know you mentioned that you were playing that before. Which modules do you have?
So I've got a few. I've got the Morgan AC 20. I have the Fryette one. I have, what am I missing? I've got a Diesel, the Soldano. I have the BE. So I think I think the Synergy stuff is a really smart way to get some of the flexibility of like, say, like a multi-processor thing, but without going digital. And so you have an analog setup, but you have almost like, you know, it's not a modeler, but you have like you have similar capacity to have a rig that contains a whole bunch of amps that you don't actually own.
Right.
More of the story. And I think it's really great for someone looking for that type of flexibility. You know what I mean? And I would just say that the real amps have power sections that you can't replace. So depending on, you know, how you're running it, you know, whether it's an amp with KT88 tubes or 6L6s, but it's got a Mercury transformer or whatever the case is, a lot of that does contribute to the end result of the tone. So,
yep.
You know, but I think for people who can't afford to have a Soldano and a Friedman and a Morgan or whatever, it's a cool intermediate that isn't digital. You know what I mean?
And I get 95% of the way there, which is really close.
Bro, yeah, it's kind of crazy, and it's pretty ingenious. And so I think people should I think it makes sense for a lot of people, if I'm being honest, especially with home setups and stuff like that, or even touring, man. Like you run a few of the Syn 2 racks and you get, 4 different modules in there. You've got, you know what I mean? You got a pretty monstrous rig at that point,
Yeah. What's Vi running? He's got 8 of them?
Dude,
I think he should. No, I think he's using mostly 2 preamps when he does it. So it's like four modules.
4 modules. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was running the Synergy stuff on Gen X even before he had his own module.
Yeah.
He was running the Morgan AC20, and there's a Fender Bassman one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Vi is definitely a guy who, as often as possible, wants to be playing directly into an amp. Like he doesn't really want to do the digital conversion thing. And I respect him for it. And he's seen a lot of gear over his career. And I like that he's actually objective as opposed to, he's just sticking to what he knows he wants out of something. And if that means, he has less flexibility, or it means he's got to wait for that gear to exist, he will wait, as opposed to compromising on the outcome. So, yeah, but Synergy, I remember him being stoked about it. And it's for those reasons. You get the flexibility of like a modeler, but you're not converting your signal and dealing with all that other stuff.
Well, with a modeler, gives you option anxiety. You know what I mean?
Dude, and Dave,
you're gonna sit there and play with it, try to tweak it, get it. I can get it better. I can get it better. And before you know it, a week later, you haven't played a note.
Yo, yeah, throw in some edibles or some drugs. You're lost.
You are gone, lost. You're lost forever.
That's great.
Menus. And Dave, I wanted to ask you, because you actually can understand some of the deep editing, but in the fractal, by the time you're in page 3 of the menu, you're into capacitance and slew rate.
Transformer, slew rate, this, that, blah, blah, blah. There is something to be said for something simple that you just have knobs and you just go boom, boom, boom. Oh, there's the sound. Okay, great. Now I can play the song.
Yes.
Whether that be a pedal into a clean amp, or whether that be a multi-channel amp, or be a single channel amp, or whatever, there is something to be said, because I know how this works. And generally down the modeler trip, you are constantly tweaking it.
Dude.
Constantly, never ends. I don't know. It doesn't sound right today. I don't know. I'm going to tweak it. And then, where's the gain again? Oh, wait, here it is on this page. And where's that? Okay, I got to find the slew rate of the transformer. I liked that before. No.
Yeah, I was that guy. Actually, on Gen X, they were making fun of me because I keep fucking poking around in that thing. And they're like,
oh, I imagine especially Zach.
Dude, yeah. They found it very amusing.
Yeah. I just plug an overdrive pedal into a JC Main 100, call it a day.
Dude. Low key, I especially in my genre of music, there's a lot of obsession over gear. And it was refreshing to go out with Gen X and see Boss pedals and a freaking sloppy pedal board and the JCM 100 or something. And you're just like, and these guys are getting great results. And it's not this esoteric NASA rig, it's yeah.
Right. I always sort of said that in doing rigs over the years for a million people. It's all the pro rigs, generally speaking, used very simplistic effects. It was like, oh, there's a Boss delay and a Boss chorus, and oh wait, it had maybe a tube screamer and this and that and some other stuff, but nothing crazy boutique or nothing crazy anything, and they got great sounds. So
it can happen.
Yeah.
Deja Blue. Tosin, do you do all your graphic design? Love your logo and the whole aesthetic. I agree. It looked great.
Thanks.
Yeah, the logo is great.
My ex-girlfriend did the logo. I'm gonna have to give her some props. She labored over that, and word marks are a whole thing. Like it's like a whole facet of graphic design. But I am into design. My brother is a menswear designer, and I kind of got influenced by him. And I'm into everything from Apple to Porsche, like companies that make well-performing products, but the function is informed by the form, or vice versa. And so, with my guitar designs, I definitely wanted to have something that looked kind of modern or maybe even forward. And ergonomics are interesting because it's a purposeful way to design something, and it's similar to how aerodynamics work. Like you have an object that is operating in a context, and there's lift and there's drag and there's stuff like that. And so the shapes you use aren't arbitrary. They relate to the fact that it's actually interfacing with some sort of medium, like high velocity air or whatever the case is. So the guitar, as it interfaces with the body, I feel like there are a lot of opportunities to kind of make that feel a bit more seamless. And so things like lightweight materials and removing parts, whether it's very deep bevels or belly cuts, or we have sections cut out of the instrument. All of this ends up looking kind of futury, but it does have some mild ergonomic benefits, and it's all design, So I definitely wanted to do something kind of stylish and forward looking. So much of guitar stuff is concreted in like, it's kind of like, like the electric guitar in some ways was epitomized by like the inception of rock music. So everything from Van Halen to Led Zeppelin, you have this sort of aesthetic, and a lot of these quintessential guitars were designed at a point in time that, because of our heroes, we don't really reconceive. It's like if you play a Strat, you're playing a Strat for various reasons. It's a great instrument, but I feel like Fender doesn't have the brand license to make something super, super 2020 looking, because everyone wants the thing that they made and whenever the Strat was conceived of. And so I'm happy to not have those constraints, and I definitely want to make something modern. And so that's kind of where the whole design approach comes from.
Yeah, I like it. I think that's super, super cool, because, the vast majority of consumers do want to see the stuff that they're familiar with. And if you can break the mold and make something new, I think that's great. I mean, I very much see that stylist, that Porsche sort of stylistic, sort of modern approach, which and stripped down at the same time. So not very clean lines, in other words, minimalistic, but modern.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is super.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Yeah, super hard to do. Yeah. I get it though, but there is still a, I don't know, I'll throw it out there, but there's still like this sexiness about the way it looks. It's like it still has this thing. It's super modern, but it's really pretty cool looking.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, it does have like look, dude, you look at a sports car and it's kind of sexy. There's like, you're kind of like, I want that thing. You know what I mean? Sure. You want to go closer to it. Yeah, that's the vibe.
I look at it this way. I'm looking at some of the guitars that Mark put up on the screen, and I'm like looking at it going, yeah, I kind of want one.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know. I don't have anything like it, but it looks really cool.
That is the perfect response. That is exactly what we want.
Oh, I agree. I was like, oh, do you have any lefties?
Are you a lefty?
I am a lefty.
Yeah, he is. He's cursed.
Yeah, this image is backwards.
They don't get enough love.
I know.
We have some coming, actually, so I'm going to have to shoot you an email. It might have a string extra than you're used to.
I'll give it a shot. I've been scared to try, but I want to.
That's fun. It like throws your mind into a different thing. You're gonna play different stuff. You're gonna just try to do different things, which is, I think that's cool.
Yeah, dude, you've probably been playing a good amount of time, and you'd be surprised what one extra string does for creativity and just working outside the box. And you've got a bunch of 6 strings anyway, so you might as well have 1 7.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Different flavor for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Let me go through the questions. A 10-string guitar. I mean, what do you think about some of these guitars that are just getting so many strings? It's getting a bit crazy, right?
Wait, does a 10-string guitar exist? Yes.
I've seen.
I don't know that.
I haven't seen a 10. Look.
Well, it depends on how you do that 10.
Right. Okay, look. The internet is vast, and there's for sure a 10-string electric somewhere, or there's a luthier who'll make you one. You can find a humbucker or a bridge for that guitar. Good luck, but there are probably ways to do that.
I saw a video of Jared Dines playing like an 18-string guitar or something like that.
Yeah. He got. Yeah, it's utterly insane.
Okay. One of those guys, I forget who it was, but yeah, Rob Scallon. Was it?
It was Jared. It was Jared.
Okay.
But there's this Russian girl, and I'm forgetting her name, but she plays only classical, and she has a 10-string guitar.
Wow.
And I think it relates to a tradition of Brahms guitar. I could be wrong. But there are some. Yeah, I don't want to. Basically, I think for the electric guitar, the most I've really seen on any real accessible scale is the 9-string. Like Schecter did one and Ibanez did one. I have one. Look, I'm very open-minded when it comes to the amount of strings you have on an instrument, but at a point, the hand is only so big. There is a physical limitation to it. It's kind of like, and the irony is like how much you can do on a 6-string guitar tuned to standard is mind-blowing. Like, look at Alan Holdsworth or Pat Metheny or Van Halen. Like, a 6-string guitar is capable of a ton. So there's kind of this arms race, or there was, for like more and more strings. But I think the dust is kind of settling, and a lot of people aren't necessarily hypnotized by adding more strings. But I personally like extended range because I like having the bass register just for the way I play. I do like having that. So, but 10 strings, not for me.
Yeah, and Steve said Ormsby was the one that made the 18-string.
Cool.
Interesting. Do you ever play acoustic? I think there was a question here. Looking.
I play classical guitar. I don't have a steel string acoustic. So, but I do love classical guitar. I love acoustic guitars. The guitar is an acoustic instrument. As electric players, I think we're constantly. I mean, look, we got an amp builder and we've got electric guitar players here. It's like definitely like in its own right, like you almost could be perfectly happy with only electric guitars. But I do think that the guitar as an acoustic instrument is really beautiful, and I'm not into just like strumming Bob Dylan songs and stuff, but I do like classical guitar, so I play that a bit.
That's cool. Nylon strings.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like Steve Stevens.
Right.
Let me see if just going through the questions, make sure we get everybody's question. But I also want to be respectful of your time, Tosin.
Well, my girlfriend's apparently stranded somewhere, so.
Oh, well then we.
Well, anyway, yeah.
Well, we'll let you go soon then. Dave, did you see my text on that?
Yep, I answered you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let me just go through here. I'll be right back. Here we go. Okay. From Plexico. Tosin, do you feel the music industry is more tolerant of race than other industries? Have you had artistic issues in Washington, D.C.? Any issues that were troublesome?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
We weren't really sure if we wanted to ask it.
Yeah, quite honestly, that's why I texted Dave. I wasn't sure I wanted to ask the question.
Well, look, I mean, race is kind of a thing that's being talked about a lot right now. So, I mean, it is what it is. I personally haven't really had a lot of negative experiences. And it might be because I'm the guy on stage playing guitar, and so I get validated in a way that's different. But I will say, like, dude, being on tour and waking up and going into the venue right when the venue's opening up, like, you wake up on your tour bus and you can load in maybe as early as, 11 a.m., 10 a.m. And sometimes they're like, can we help you, sir? Like, what are you doing here? Because they're thinking of metal bands playing that night, and they don't associate black music with metal. So you'll just get this sort of like, can we help you thing. I don't read that as negatively as some people might, because I can acknowledge that I'm kind of anomalous in my genre. You know what I mean? And then usually, like, it's fine. And I have a weird, like, obviously my band's performing, we have fans coming to see us, so they're fans. They're people who are respectful and nice because they see me as a person. But sometimes we're in some parts of the country, and like, maybe we're walking to a bar or something, and you could feel a little, depending on where in the country you are.
Yeah.
But I would say, as far as the industry is concerned, there are a lot of artists of color, so it's not strange to have black performers or Latino performers or whatever, because that has always been the case in our country. And so I've had primarily good experiences.
Good.
So metal is, it's kind of open-minded. It's weird. It's like, I know I stand out in some weird ways because there's not many black dudes playing 8-string guitars, but it's kind of like, it hasn't been a racism thing as much as it's been a mild novelty sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm one of the lucky ones,
Yep. No, I'm glad you're lucky. And
that's great.
As other people have said, and he said, he wrote, thanks for not censoring his question. Yeah, no problem. I don't see race. I only see Fender Gibson. That's funny. Yeah, I don't see race either. I only see people, as Roy Batty says. So
I mean, everyone's just a person. I don't care. I mean, the whole country was founded on immigrants. Please. I mean, stop.
Yes, please.
Ridiculous.
I love that. Stop, please stop. But yeah, thanks for your question and your super chat. We do appreciate it. And this was the question from Unfucking Believable. How often does Tosin play an acoustic?
Not that often lately, but I do like to keep up my classical chops just because it translates into other stuff.
Cool. I think I've gone through all the questions, Dave, unless you saw any others that I missed.
Well, then I see a song in the future between Tosin on classical with Steve Stevens on classical.
I'd love to see that.
I don't know. I'm dreaming. You know what? I think I've been inside too long. I'm dreaming up new music for people to get together and do stuff with. You know what I mean? Like, I feel that everyone should be just
collaborating.
You know what? Get together, make some music. Just do something. Do something.
It's been happening, Dave. Yo, you could pull like a Mike Varney and just be like the hub of all these guitar players, and like,
it's just like, go make some music. Like, get together with someone that you don't normally play with, and see what comes out, because that's how interesting things are born. And especially with people with different styles and different things, they'll play off each other and they'll come out with something really neat, really interesting or different or something cool,
Yeah, man. And actually, I know fans of guitar really love to see like their favorite dudes work together. It's always a good time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm open to some collaborations.
That's cool.
Yeah. And in this environment of releasing a single, it's really simple to do. You know, it's like, hey, I did the song with so and so, and boom, there it is. You know,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you can work it out financially or whatever, if you make any money off of it. But chances are you might not.
You never know, man. People have been really generous during COVID. Like, I figured like amp sales and guitar sales and all this stuff would suffer, but like,
Yeah. Oh no, not at all.
yeah, it's kind of
counterintuitive, right? You didn't. I never expected that. I thought a lot
everyone's just sitting at home. Like, I want that guitar. I want that.
Yeah, but did you fear that like if they're shutting down the economy, people can't work, and they're thinking, you know, they've got to conserve, but actually, people have just been.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think you know there are a lot of people that actually lost their income, but there are also a lot of people that didn't lose their income. But what they did get is they were spending less of their income because they're not going anywhere. They're not going on vacation. They're not spending it elsewhere. So now it's like, yeah, I'm going to buy that extra guitar because I really want that.
Totally.
You know, so which is good, and hopefully everyone's playing and having fun, you know, and enjoying themselves with it.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Yeah.
T Neville sent us a super chat. Thank you. How does Tosin remember all the awesome parts to his songs and keep everything so tight live?
Yeah. Muscle memory. I don't know. Like, yeah, like it's essentially if you learn something the right way, like it's hard to forget. And muscle memory is a thing on guitar. I don't know if that's the correct term, but there's kind of once you got it sort of thing.
Mm.
So yeah, there's no magic to it really.
That's cool. Well, I want to thank you, Tosin, for coming on the show. It's been so awesome to have you on. Pleasure to meet you and learn more about you and your career and your brand. And I wish you all the best of luck in the future.
Appreciate that. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
No problem, man.
No,
thank you for making it. You have to go save your girlfriend now?
Apparently, yeah. I guess
okay.
Now.
You're the savior. That's cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming on. Our next show is December 4th. Just making sure. December 4th with Lindy Fralin. So from Lindy Fralin Pickups.
Some good pickups.
Yeah.
Great pickups.
Yeah.
And everybody have a great weekend. Get some rest. I know I will. And if we won't see you for Thanksgiving, so enjoy Thanksgiving as well. And hang on, Tosin, while we hang up. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you.
Peace out, guys.